Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Second Gen's Liberated Panda. My co-host Angel's been given the night off, so I'm flying solo tonight. It's me, Jason. So, so let's start in Southeast Asia. Right now, and with a little bit of the drama that's going on between the Filipino foreign minister and the Chinese government. So the president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duarte, is known to be quite the outspoken guy. But this time it's his foreign minister who got in on the action. In a recent series of tweets, Philippines Foreign Minister Teodoro Locsin Jr. had some harsh criticisms of the Chinese government, demanding that they pull ships out of Filipino waters in the South China Sea. He said, "China, my friend, how politely can I put it? Let me see. What are you doing to our friendship?" He continued. "You, not us. We're trying. You're like an ugly oaf forcing your attention on a handsome guy who wants to be a friend." That's quite the statement. to to call the Chinese government an ugly oaf when we're trying to be nice to you. The administration of Rodrigo Duarte have been pretty kind to the Chinese over time. They've sought to work with them. He really hasn't criticized them too much, unlike the American governments who frequently criticize the Chinese. But this was quite the response, or quite the series of tweets, to say the least. And then there was also a document that was released by the Office of Foreign Affairs from the Philippines, calling China to remove its vessels from waters around the Calayan Island Group and the Scarborough Shoal around in what they consider to be Filipino waters. Beijing had no law enforcement rights in that area, they stated, and its unauthorized lingering presence of vessels is a blatant infringement of Filipino sovereignty, it added, per the statement. China has responded back. They've criticized, saying that they are looking for more peaceful sort of foreign affairs, that they should be nicer when conducting foreign affairs. That's kind of to be expected. China kind of bullies the region a bit. Like I stated, President Duarte has been pretty soft towards Beijing, most recently thanking their vaccinations they provided to the country. But he clearly does have a line in the sand when it comes to territorial disputes, as do most nations, to be fair. In 2016, an international court of arbitration ruled in favor of Manila's claims against China, but obviously that's been largely ignored over time. So there's some smoke here, but maybe no real fire. But let's see. So there's other stories that we can layer on top of this that's recently happened. One of them is, according to CNN, on April the 25th, the day that the country of Australia honors a lot of its war victims in what's called Anzac Day, newly appointed Defense Minister Peter Dutton said that a conflict with China over Taiwan shouldn't quote be discounted. So he was adding that Australians need to be realistic about tensions in the region, and that was a couple days before the Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced a bout of increased military spending, $500 million worth. To which Australia Major General Adam Finlay said a conflict with China was, quote, a high likelihood, unquote. Tensions between these two governments are nothing new. Australia has been a little bit more aggressive towards the Chinese, not as aggressive as maybe the United States, but they have been. And some people have said that this is the Australian government's chance to try to cover up maybe some of the issues they've had with the COVID vaccine rollout, and that by kind of getting their population in anti-Chinese sentiment, this could drive a bout of nationalism to a certain degree. But who really knows? I mean, these countries have been going at each other for a while now. A lot of harsh words, but not really necessarily anything. But it did obviously cause Washington to sound an alarm. Australia is a major ally as part of the Five Eyes intelligence group, as are other nations in that area. And so it's no secret that one day in April, over 20 Chinese military fighters and bombers flew right over Taiwanese airspace. So this obviously, like I said, caused Washington to sound a major alarm. But see, in Taiwan, the prevailing wisdom is that China would rather subdue them without an actual fight. thinking is that they're just going to levy try to beat them down economically. They're used to seeing China flex its muscles through the decades, but they've never really followed through. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe they didn't have the resources, but Taipei believes China would rather just choke them off economically, like the pineapple ban they had in February, where they banned the importation of Taiwanese pineapples, claiming they had diseases. Jury's out on that. But there are more heightened tensions in the South China Sea. And honestly, their regional neighbors could pull Taiwan into a struggle, which completely changes their view that China's not going to act. It's no secret Xi Jinping is focused on his legacy, and he's already incurred in the South China Sea by building landing strips and coral atolls of the Spratly Islands. But that's not really an end game. That's more of a means to an end, building those military bases there. So as of 2016, about 30% of global maritime crude oil shipments, though, went through these busy waters of the South China Sea, which is very important because controlling the shipping lanes, going back to ancient times, has oftentimes controlled who owns land areas and who's going to win wars. So this is a big strategic precursor. The idea that they could choke off maritime trade to Japan, South Korea, Taiwan by controlling these waters is pretty massive. There are other routes around, sure, but it does cost more money, and it is of strategic importance, especially when they really don't own those waters in the South China Sea. Most of it is international waters that they're trying to basically take over. So China's control of any of these trade routes really could cause a problem for a number of nations, and that could potentially bring about a conflict at some point. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has denied the possibility of a, quote, Cold War between the two nations. I wonder if he's been following the news lately. We've had some form of a cold conflict, maybe not a war, but a conflict now for a while. But it does take two to tango. So the big question is does China have the capabilities to wage an outright war? We know that they will try to wage economic conflict, but whether or not they wage an outright physical war with boots on the ground is another story. Could they invade Taiwan? Possibly, but the prevailing wisdom is that they don't have the military power right now to do it. We will see over time. I'm sure this will all come to a head. We will see increased economic pressure. They always say economic pressure is a precursor to military pressure. So time will tell. On to the next story. So this is a fun one. China launched a rocket into space as part of its new space station. It was called a successful launch, propelling their Long March 5B rocket with a module named Heavenly Harmony. That sounds so nice. The first of its new space station in the low Earth orbit on April the 29th from Wenchang in China. The station is expected to be completed by the end of 2022. Unfortunately, that's not all that went into space. 90-foot tall core of the Long March rocket, instead of falling back to Earth, also propelled itself into orbit. You can't make this up. So apparently this isn't the first time it happened. The same type of rocket, the Long March 5B, had some pretty extensive issues. When it was launched last year, long rods of metal fell from the sky, damaging several buildings in the Ivory Coast. That was reported by one news source. Another news source said that it fell into the ocean and didn't do any damage. There were no fatalities. But for now, they're saying that this core could fall down at any given time. The hope is that most of it burns up re-entering the atmosphere, but some will probably remain. And it could land anywhere from New York to New Zealand. So I guess you're only safe if you're at the poles or in Canada, right? So the Chinese government hasn't given out a lot of information, shockingly. And they say that it's going to land in the ocean, but there's a lot of land in there, a lot of ground it could land on, and who knows where it's going to go. Hopefully, it doesn't hurt anyone. And for now, we'll keep you updated because that's an interesting story. So moving on to some domestic news, and possibly an announcement of possibly the greatest tax cut in U.S. history. During a comment made in a speech on Monday, President Joe Biden said those who make under $400,000 per year quote, will not pay a single penny in taxes, unquote. Not only that, he pledged to do it while not raising the deficit. I'm going to read the exact quote. Quote, the reason I'm going to do this is because I keep hearing on the press, Biden's going to raise your taxes, unquote. Anybody making less than $400,000 a year will not pay a single penny in taxes, and we will not increase the deficit either, unlike the last gigantic tax cut, which increased the deficit by $2 trillion. Well, his numbers are a little bit off, to say the least. He really didn't actually say that, or he didn't actually mean it. What he meant to say was, which was later clarified by his press secretary, aka cleanup crew, Jen Psaki, is that he will not raise taxes a penny on anyone making under $400,000 or any family making under $400,000. It's that you would pay taxes as a unit. Quite the difference from his actual statement. Quite the difference. As we know, a lot of these tax increases end up hitting the middle class more. It's kind of only a matter of time. He's proposing $3 trillion in new spending, and he's going to have to find a way to pay for it. So if he increases taxes on the wealthy, they're going to just end up with more tax loopholes for the wealthy, and they're probably going to get around taxes much like they have in the past. So this is to be determined, but we'll see this bill. I don't know where it's going to go for that. I don't think the rich can just pay for this. There's going to be a lot of average people that are going to have to pay, whether it's a import tax, a VAT tax, or various other taxes that are getting levied per use that will get paid. So on our final piece of news on the show, there is a little known event going on, except those who watch politics pretty closely. It's happening in Maricopa County, Arizona. While some can call it a conspiracy theory-led fishing expedition, Maricopa County, Arizona, in the heart of the Phoenix Metroplex, is, no joke, auditing and recounting its ballots from the 2020 presidential election. You heard that right. Just when you thought it was over, it's not. A company named Cyber Ninjas is helping to conduct an audit of all the ballots in Maricopa County and that's 2.1 million ballots cast. So it's not a small county by any means. It's actually one of the larger counties in the country. Cyber Ninjas, this company, is a tech company out of Florida with really no prior experience in auditing. I'm not sure why they were brought in. It's interesting that they chose a company like this. Their CEO, though, has made some comments that have been considered conspiratorial in the past. I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it. The state is partially paying for the audit, but they're also raising donations. Republicans are for the audit, private donations to fund it. So this audit is supposed to be fully forensic. So they're looking at the paper, they're looking at everything about it. They have hand counters with multiple observers present. They're doing about 50 ballots in 16 minutes. So full hand recount. They're looking at papers. They're looking at the computers. This is apparently going to be the most transparent recount in history, according to the CEO of Cyber Ninjas. So it was originally scheduled only to last till May the 14th, but through two legal challenges by Democrats, which have both been shot down by a liberal-leaning and a conservative-leaning judge, have allowed the audit to proceed. So they're saying it could last up to 60 days. So this year could last a couple of months even. Some conservatives claim that there are 750,000 ballots with potential issues in a state where Joe Biden won by a very slim 10,000 vote margin in November. So what does this mean? We're in uncharted waters. I mean, think about it. If this audit actually came up and said, yes, there was irregularities, is there the ability for this company to really hold water and go with this election? I don't know what happens. Does Arizona take back its votes? I mean, SCOTUS has ruled before that these votes, once the delegates go, it's over. But we're at a point right now, the average citizen, if Arizona does this and you see fraud, there's a popular saying by a lot of people on the right, at least, that fraud anywhere invalidates the results everywhere. So if they find fraud in Arizona, what does that mean for everywhere else? I can't even imagine how this would end. Now, right now, we're not nearly there. Who knows if this audit even has the power? But how many Americans are going to look out there at this administration and just say, you know, those "not my president" hashtags in the last 4 years are going to get really interesting if they can find that possibly he didn't win. And this isn't. I mean, it is an official audit, but they just can't take Biden out of the White House and put Trump in by any means. So I don't know. This is crazy. When I first heard this, I know a lot of Republicans and were calling for audits in states leading up to the final vote counts and even after. And there was talk in April of Trump possibly coming back into office. But I mean, we're in May right now. This is nuts. We're already in uncharted waters that they're still auditing and expecting that maybe this thing could be changed. But I mean, what happens? What happens? I don't know. So that is pretty much everything we had today. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thanks to our sponsors who continue to support us. And if you have any questions, definitely tweet us at Liberated Panda, Liberated underscore Panda, sorry. Or just comment on the post. Angel will be back next week. Don't worry. But until then, we'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.